Thank you to Fergal and Waterford Chamber for inviting me to speak at this event. And it's a real pleasure to speak at an event that has an optimistic tinge to it, looking ahead to a brighter future after a pretty bleak year that we've all endured in 2020. To give you an introduction to myself, my name is David McNamara. I'm an economist by training, and I work in EY's economic advisory practice. I've been with EY for the last 2.5 years. Prior to that, I worked in financial services and academia. So I've worked across a host of different sectors with a whole bunch of different clients. And over the past year, we've been particularly helping clients solve issues and problems that they face in response to the crisis in terms of COVID and also Brexit and other issues that they face. So I'll try today to bring some of that experience over that past while. What this presentation will not be is a data heavy and chart heavy economic forecasting presentation. I'll try and bring some personal insight and anecdotes, stepping outside my comfort zone perhaps a little bit. So let's get into the first topic. And the first one is science and the fact that we've been saved by science. And I am not an expert, and I'm not going to delve into to the scientific impact of COVID and forecast what might happen with the future. But just observing as a layman over the past few months, the speed and the efficacy of the vaccines that have been created by scientists across the world is just inspiring. I've picked out two particular scientists that have been working on the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine from Ireland, Professor Teresa Lamb and Professor Adrian Hill. I think it's fantastic that for such a small country, we really punch above our weight in terms of our experts and our scientists. I think what's important really is not only to have invested in this period in that scientific endeavor, but to continue in that vein now over the next few years. And as an economist, we understand that to increase the productive capacity of any economy, you need to invest now to reap the benefits in the future. And Ireland in particular needs to do that. We compete on an international stage in terms of our markets. We don't have huge natural resources that we can rely on. Our key natural resource is our people and their skills. And we've probably lagged other countries over the last few years. But what's really heartening and gives me hope over the next few years is that we've really pivoted now over the last year towards investing in research and innovation. We've now got a new department specifically for that purpose, the Department of Higher Education, Innovation and Science. And I think that's a really good sign. And you see it even this last week where the BT Young Scientist exhibition was held online, and you see more inspiring ideas from teenagers all over the country. So it would only give you hope for the future, but we need to invest in it. And I think the early signs are great. And if it's a lesson that we can take from the COVID-19 crisis, it's that you need to invest in science because science will come to your rescue when you need it. So moving on to my second topic and probably back into more of my comfort zone, and it's the economy. And the second resurgence topic for me has been our resilience. And I suppose that's something that's happened over the past and the present, but it's important for our future and our immediate future in particular, is that the Irish economy has performed quite well compared to other nations. Now, lots of people have lost their job and there's been significant impact on the economy, unprecedented. But the indicators in terms of a macro levels show that we've weathered it relatively well, like GDP, which isn't a perfect measure, but one of the best performing economies in Europe. And if you look at our tax take, so corporation tax, which has held up very well because of the presence of those multinationals, but also our income tax base, which is our most important tax base, which funds most of our public services, that's only fallen very marginally last year. So people that have remained in their jobs have continued to pay tax, and that's allowed the government to provide those unprecedented supports to households and businesses and the health system. And even if you look at where we've had to borrow to plug those holes in the short term, our borrowing rates have fallen to negative rates. So to put that in perspective, 2 weeks ago, we borrowed 5.5 billion euros, a 10-year bond on the international markets, and we paid a negative interest rate of 2.5%. That would mean if you were getting a mortgage from your bank and your bank decided to pay you interest instead of you paying the bank interest. So it's an amazing turnaround from where we were 10 years ago. And that resilience is allowing us to support the economy through this very difficult time. And that's related then to my third topic, and that's around abandoning austerity as a means to spur a recovery or support an economy. And if you cast your minds back to 10 years ago, we were in a very, very different space. The IMF were about to arrive in the country in late 2010. We couldn't borrow on international markets. The state was essentially bankrupt. And the prescription really was at that time by many international experts and international bodies was that you need to get your deficit down and your debt down, and there's a very difficult medicine to take. And that really goes against most of the economic theory and what economists were saying at the time. And thankfully, we've moved past that. And you see those international bodies, and there's a quote there from the OECD chief economist talking about the fact that austerity is not the answer and that you need to think about it more holistically. It's not just about a balance sheet, it's about people's lives and the wider economic effects. So interest rates are low. It's a perfect time to borrow to support the economy while the private sector can't do the heavy lifting. And we can see that in the numbers of what the government has done over the past year. Nearly 10 billion in income supports to households, unthinkable even a year ago. 21 billion budget for the Department of Health, hundreds of millions in supports to the enterprise sector, and that's really kept the economy afloat. And mistakes have been made along the way. Things could have been done better, but things were done at speed, and we're a world away from where we were 10 years ago when the government was really adding to the pain by introducing the austerity measures that we had. So that gives me reason for optimism that the economy can come out of this recession and this downturn in a much stronger place than it did 10 years ago. Moving on to maybe more local level impacts of the COVID-19 and looking at some of the maybe positive impacts that we can take from the last year. This one is around the public realm, transport, physical activity. And one of the things most of us experienced was when our social circle really contracted and our social space really contracted to 2K for a period of time and 5K presently, we really started to explore our immediate surroundings and probably value our public realm in a different way. And what you've seen then subsequently over the past 10 months is local authorities and governments react to that to provide the space necessary to allow people to room to breathe and room to get that physical activity that they need within their 2K and 5K zone. A couple of examples we've seen in Irish towns and cities, the coastal mobility route in Dunleary, Rathdown, which helped to provide a safe cycleway for all ages while the public transport capacity was reduced because of COVID-19. Princess Street in Cork, pedestrianised during the summer to allow businesses to operate within the COVID restrictions, and it was a huge success. And I suppose that has, provided a window to what a better future could be if we design our public realm, our towns and our villages and cities in a different way that is actually centred on people rather than the movement of traffic. And I think that's a good thing for everyone because you reduce your pollution, you reduce your carbon footprint, and people are getting more exercise. And you've seen an explosion in bike sales last year. You couldn't get a bike for love nor money. And some of that will revert to type over the next year potentially. People might switch back to our old ways, but even if there's a small cohort of people who continue with that physical activity that they might have taken up in the pandemic, that's a huge impact on the economy. Less poor health, less spending for the health service, better mental health for people. So I think this is a real positive shift that we've seen, and it's something that we need to take further and take on over the next few years as we move out of the pandemic. finally, my final resurgence topic, and it's one that's close to my heart, and it's around the resurgence of rural Ireland. It's close to my heart because I come from rural Ireland. I grew up in Mayo in a small village, and I left home at 18, went to college, and went to Dublin as a lot of people do to work. And I never really considered that I might have an opportunity to move home until the pandemic came, and now it's a serious option for me and my family. And the remote working piece has been difficult for people to get used to. I think people miss the social interaction, but it has given people flexibility, and it has, I suppose, broadened people's horizons um, around where they can work and where they can live, and what their expectations are. And you've seen that reflected in some of the numbers we've seen. So property viewings and queries have gone through the roof for rural towns and villages across the country outside the main cities. The rollout of the National Broadband Plan will enable people to work remotely anywhere they choose. And I think, businesses will probably have a permanent flexible working or remote working workforce when we come out the other side of this pandemic. And I think that's a huge thing for rural Ireland, because for years we've seen a brain drain, or, young people leave and maybe not come back. And you've seen that aging of rural Ireland versus the cities. And that's important, because if you get more young people coming back to live, to raise their families in rural communities, that provides a vibrancy for rural communities. It provides an energy, and that's has a significant impact on those economies. And I just wanted to give you an example of that. So we have a young analyst who joined our team from college last year, Clodagh Nash. She's from County Clare, finished her degree in UCD, and was living and working with us in Dublin. Pandemic hits, and she decides to move back home, as a lot of people do. Um, but where Claude has had a huge impact on her local community, and she has an impact anyway, even when she's just coming home from for the weekend. But living there, Claude decided during the month of November to raise money for a local children's charity called Clare Crusaders. And she decided to swim in the sea every morning at sunrise in a bid to raise funds for this really worthwhile charity. And she raised over €6,000. So that's just one example of someone contributing to their community that they might not have been able to do if they were in Dublin and commuting in and out to their office. It gives people the space to maybe broaden their horizons, think of other things, spend more time with their families perhaps rather than commuting, and think about their wider impact that they can have on their communities. So I think this is, this gives us an opportunity to breathe new life into rural Ireland, and it's one of the positive things that has come out of this pandemic. So that's my 5 topics. I hope you found them interesting, and I'm looking forward to a really interesting discussion over the course of today. Thank you very much.